With us now is Sam Riddle. He's returning to the Zero Hour for his second appearance here. We're glad to have him. He is an honorably discharged Vietnam-era veteran. He earned a BA after dropping out of high school. Okay. Sam Riddle dropped out of high school to enlist in the United States Army. Then he earned a BA degree from Michigan State University and went on to receive his law degree from the University of Michigan Law School. He has also many years, decades of management and experience in political and media consulting, has an emphasis on crisis management, and right now with what's going on in the world, that's a good talent to have. Sam, are you with us?
Good afternoon. How are you doing, RJ?
Well, I'm doing better for hearing you, my friend.
Okay.
It's good to have you back on the program.
Great to be on.
And listen, yeah, good. Glad to have you. Listen, I haven't been to Detroit in too long, and I am coming next month, but, here's the deal. I'm trying to sort out from a distance. You wrote an awesome piece about it, which we'll get to in a second, but I am trying to sort out from a distance what's going on over there because it used to be, used to live there. But I mean, I'm wondering, why is it that, what's the water situation there? I mean, we've got a situation where I guess your city emergency manager, unelected ruler of the city, has taken it upon himself to privatize part of the water system there, and they're turning people's water off, but not the corporations, just people. What's the deal?
In a nutshell, what's occurring, RJ, is that we have thousands of Detroiters whose water is being turned off because they can't afford to pay the water bills. The irony of that is that Detroit, as you know, is in the center of the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes, I don't have to tell you, but most of the water on the planet, fresh water, is right in the Great Lakes. I mean, they're the primary source of fresh water worldwide, save the polar caps themselves. Yet here in Detroit, where 60% of the 60% of the children live in poverty, the water is being turned off. Now, the article you're referring to, I did write an article concerning UN Resolution 64/292, in which the United Nations General Assembly explicitly recognized the human right to water and sanitation and acknowledged that clean drinking water and sanitation are essential to the realization of all human rights. That isn't Sam speaking. That's a United Nations resolution. Yet in this nation, America, the water is being turned off every week to at least 4,000 Detroiters, most of whom are people of color, African Americans. And we feel that's inhumane, a lot of us, and I am the political director, Michigan, of the National Action Network. And shortly, we'll be appealing to some members of Congress to take this issue before the United Nations.
Right, and that's the piece that I think is brilliant, and I support you for that. And this is really about, and it's a great point, of course, about the Great Lakes. It's remember the ancient mariner, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. But in this case, it's about money. It's about, as I understand it, but correct me, Sam, if I'm wrong. It's about the fact that that's being privatized, the right to collect the water. Is that right?
Well, there's an attempt to do that. That hasn't been done yet, but believe me, it's about the next step. Just today, the governor of Michigan, the democracy-destroying, union-busting Governor Snyder, who now has set his eyes on the national Republican ticket, just today, he and his Detroit City Council, his mayor, his Negro proxy emergency manager, or They signed into agreement this grand bargain. Basically, what's occurring is that as we, America, inflict drone democracy the world over, democracy has been eradicated thoroughly in Detroit. Our city council cannot make any decisions. Our mayor cannot make any decisions. All the decisions are made by an emergency manager, the Negro emergency manager proxy of this Governor Snyder. And, as one who served 4 years in the military and honorably discharged during the Vietnam War era, it galls me in particular because they have our guys and women are fighting and dying world over in the name of democracy, and the doors to democracy have been slammed shut in Detroit where dollars are trumping democracy. There's something wrong with that picture.
Well, there sure is. And I guess my question for you, too, right around now, just a recent article says that not only are we having all these people have their water shut off, but the rates are going up.
Well, yeah, and not only
8.7%
that,
increase.
but that Detroit City Council, which is really the governor's city council now, they just voted to raise the water rates 8%. We already have a population of Detroit, again, where 60% of the children live in poverty, which can't afford the current water rates. What are they going to do with the new increase? I mean, this is sheer madness.
And yet they're not. I'm trying to remember who it was, but I know there were some big corporations there who were not paying their water bills, and nobody was shutting their water off.
No, as a matter of fact, you can go down the line. You could look at, I think, Ford Field, the Elitches. There were a number of big corporations which simply are not paying water bills, and yet the water continues to flow for them. But the governor and the emergency manager seem to take great glee at saying, "Pay up or we cut it off." The water. I mean, the article that I wrote for the Michigan Citizen, the title of it was "UN Turn on Detroit Water," and unless we expose to the world what is occurring, I believe it will only get worse. I mean, we have two Detroits right now going. We see this throughout urban America, but the gentrification process, that is, the right peopling of Detroit, is taking place right now. And I've got to tell you, some of the most inhumane acts in this nation and the world are taking place in Detroit right now.
See, here's the way I see it. And you tell me if I'm wrong, if you think I'm wrong, but here's how I look at it. I see Detroit as the kind of test laboratory for the society they want to build, the cities of the future that they want. And I think their attitude is, well, because the budget problems are a little more extreme in New York. The hedge funds, raked through the pension funds and so on more. The white flight was greater. All the other manipulations of the economy, because they can make it sound a little more extreme. They're kind of using the people of Detroit as experimental subjects. If we get away with this here, we can do it everywhere. We can take away their democratic rights through emergency manager laws everywhere in the country. We can shut off their water. We can sell off the city property. You name. We can cut their pensions. On and on and on. And so I kind of see one of the reasons why I think fighting for Detroit is important for the whole country is just because it's right. Number two, I think fighting for Detroit is important because I think first Detroit, they came for Detroit and I said nothing. Then they're going to come for Chicago. Then they're going to come for Washington. Then they're going to come for Los Angeles, and on and on and on.
Yeah, Philadelphia, Baltimore, the list gets South Central, Los Angeles. I mean, the list gets very long, and the reason is because unlike decades, a generation ago, when we had a labor-intensive society fueling the automobile industry, that's not required in the high-tech age of today. The labor that was based here in Detroit is no longer needed. So you've got a whole layers of human beings that are expendable who have probably the most piss-poor educational system, which is also being run by the state, and which is also a colossal failure. You look at the test scores, you look at some of the discipline problems. I mean, it's just unreal what is occurring in Detroit. And it's inhumane at its base. But that's the very reason Governor Snyder of Michigan can say and try to get a place on the National Republican ticket by saying, look, we control them, we put them in their place in Michigan. I can do the same across the country. And he will receive a lot of support. I mean, the things that are occurring here, and some people might take offense at this, but it's the right people Detroit, it almost takes on a Nazi-like atmosphere here in terms of the impact on people of color and African Americans and poor people in particular.
Well, and I think that, you got to see it to believe it. That's the other part of it, is that I think people who they're isolated from it, they're in other parts of the country, they're in suburban areas or whatever, they don't see the extremity of the poverty, the depth of the problem, and they don't see the. Again, I keep coming back to my mind gets. I try to wrap my mind around the idea that the average water bill in Detroit is what, $65-$75 a month. That somehow they're turning people's water off for that, but you've got all these large corporate interests. They're not turning their water off when they don't pay.
Well,
One of those people paying up would be like 30,000 ordinary
well,
people.
the other thing is this: Detroit is the world headquarters of General Motors, which receives more welfare, more corporate welfare almost than anyone else has ever seen in this nation. I mean, General Motors got a multi-billion-dollar bailout. They still owe $10 billion of that, and yet they're walking around with their heads held high. But that was on the backs of the American people. The General Motors, Chrysler, received the big bailouts, the too big to fail banks, which are directly responsible in many ways for the blight infestation of Detroit with those predatory loans that they made. I mean,
There is no question about it. Unfortunately,
I don't
we're
want
going
to
to
go
have to.
on and on a rant, but I mean, you're
We
right. The silence.
Well, we can't. We can't
is
rant,
fatal.
Sam, because we're out of time. But it's always, as always, great to have you on the show. And listen, keep up the good work, keep up the good fight, and Detroit's not going down that easy, right?
Okay, RJ, and keep informing people. Love you, man. Take it easy.
Love you too. Take care. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we will be right back after this with the Zero Hour.